Commander Jake Morrison watched the last human transport ship disappear into the black void of space. His hands gripped the metal railing of the observation deck as Earth grew smaller behind the departing vessel. The orbital station around his home planet felt empty now, like a house after all the family had moved away. 3 months ago, everything had been different. Humans had been working alongside dozens of alien species in the Galactic Council. They had shared technology, traded goods, and helped solve problems across hundreds of star systems. Jake had been proud to serve as a liaison officer, helping coordinate human military support for Council operations. Then came the Kepler incident. Dr. Lisa Carter had been there when it happened. She was a xenobiologist who studied alien life forms and had been working on Kepler-7, a mining colony run by the gentle Altarian people. The Altarians were peaceful traders who had never hurt anyone in their long history. They looked like tall, thin humans, but with blue skin and large black eyes that always seemed sad. Pirates had attacked the colony on a Tuesday morning. These weren't ordinary criminals, but members of the Scarth Brotherhood, violent raiders who killed for profit. The local security forces were overwhelmed within hours. Hundreds of Altarian families were trapped in the mining tunnels with no way to escape. Captain Steve Parker had been commanding the human patrol ship Liberty in that sector. When he received the distress call, he didn't hesitate. His ship arrived at Kepler-7 just as the pirates were preparing to execute the civilian miners. The battle was swift and decisive. Human marines stormed the colony, while Parker's ship destroyed 3 pirate vessels in orbit, every single Altarian. Civilians survived. The pirates were either dead or captured. It was exactly the kind of rescue operation that humans had performed dozens of times before. Jake remembered feeling proud when he read the mission report. But the Galactic Council saw things differently. Ambassador Kelfara of the Vorthan Collective had filed an official complaint within days. Her species looked like giant insects with multiple arms and cold, calculating minds. She had stood before the council chamber and declared that human actions at Kepler-7 were unauthorized military intervention and unnecessary violence. Lisa had tried to defend the rescue operation during the hearings. She had shown footage of Altarian children who would have died without human help. She had presented testimony from the miners themselves, thanking the human soldiers for saving their lives. None of it mattered. The Zephyrian ambassador had been even worse. His people were tall and thin with gray skin and no visible emotions. He had clicked his mandibles together in what passed for their version of disapproval and said that humans acted without proper authorization from the council. According to him, Captain Parker should have waited for official permission before engaging the pirates. How long would that have taken? Lisa had asked during her testimony. The proper channels require a minimum of 72 hours for approval of military action, the Zephyrian had replied. The civilians would have been dead in 6 hours. Lisa had said the Zephyrian had simply stated that proper procedure was more important than individual outcomes. Jake remembered watching the final vote on the communication screen. Species after species had voted to censure humanity for aggressive behavior and failure to respect galactic law. Even the Altarians, the very people who had been saved, had abstained from voting rather than support their human rescuers. The Council's final decision had been unanimous among voting members. Humanity was too unpredictable and violent to remain in civilized space. They were given 6 months to withdraw all human presence from Council territory. Admiral Ben Parker, Steve's father and commander of the human space fleet, had received the official notice on a Friday afternoon. Jake had been in his office when the message arrived. The old admiral had read it twice, set it down on his desk, and then looked out the window at Earth for a long time. "Pack everything," the admiral had finally said. "We're done here." The evacuation had begun immediately. human colonies throughout. Council space started shutting down operations. Trade agreements were terminated. Scientific research projects were abandoned. Diplomatic missions were recalled. Every human citizen, soldier, scientist, and worker began the long journey back to human space. But Admiral Parker had made an important decision that surprised everyone, including Jake. Instead of just withdrawing to human territory within the galaxy, he had ordered a complete exodus beyond the galactic rim. Every human ship, station, and settlement was to be abandoned. Humanity would leave known space entirely. "If they don't want us here," the Admiral had said during his final briefing, "then we won't be here." The other human leaders had agreed. Dr. Lisa Carter had packed up her research and joined the exodus. Captain Steve Parker had loaded his ship with refugees from a dozen worlds. Commander Maria Santos had supervised the shutdown of the deep space communication network that humans had built and maintained for 30 years. No one had said goodbye. The alien species had expected formal ceremonies and diplomatic farewells. They had prepared speeches about mutual respect and future cooperation. Instead, they found empty human facilities with the lights turned off and the doors locked. Every piece of human technology had been removed. Every human database had been wiped clean. Even the gift shops in the space stations had been emptied. Jake had been one of the last humans to leave. His job had been to oversee the final shutdown of the orbital defense platform around Earth. The massive station had protected the home system for over a century, but now it was being stripped down to basic components. Everything useful was being loaded onto transport ships for the journey to unknown space. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had stopped by his office on her last day. She was a medical researcher who had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple alien species. Her work had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" she had asked Jake. He had looked out at the stars where human ships were already disappearing into the void. "They made their choice. Now we're making ours." Amy had nodded and left with her research team. Jake never saw her again. Now, 3 months later, Jake was watching the very last human transport leave Earth's orbit. The ship was carrying the final group of human civilians who had chosen to join the Exodus rather than remain in a galaxy that didn't want them. The Galactic Council had gotten exactly what they wanted. Humanity was gone. There were no more human patrol ships protecting trade routes. No more human engineers maintaining the automated systems. No more human doctors treating alien diseases. No more human scientists making breakthrough discoveries. Jake activated the final shutdown sequence for the orbital station. The lights went out section by section until only emergency power remained. He walked to the shuttle bay where his own small ship was waiting. In a few hours, he would follow the Exodus fleet beyond the edge of known space. As his shuttle pulled away from the dark station, Jake took one last look at Earth. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful, but it also looked abandoned. For the first time in human history, Earth had no protectors in space. The galaxy was about to learn what life was like without humans to keep the peace. Captain Ryan Hughes should have been responding to the distress signal from the Altarian freighter Peaceful Trader when it started broadcasting emergency codes near the Vega system. The massive cargo ship had suffered a catastrophic failure in its main engine core, leaving it drifting dead in space, with 47 crew members slowly running out of air. But Captain Hughes was somewhere beyond the galactic rim with the rest of his species, and no one else bothered to answer the call. The freighter drifted in the void for 3 weeks before a Zephyrian patrol ship finally detected it during a routine sweep. By then, all 47 Altarians were dead. The rescue team found them, floating in the corridors, their large black eyes closed forever. The ship's chief engineer had left a final log entry explaining that the problem was simple to fix but required replacement parts that only human manufacturers produced. Ambassador Calthara received the incident report in her office aboard the Council Station orbiting Proxima Centauri. She read it twice, her insect-like mandibles clicking with what might have been concern. The Vorthan Collective had always prided itself on efficiency, but even she had to admit that 47 deaths from a preventable mechanical failure seemed wasteful. The problem was becoming more obvious each day. Humans had not just been members of the Galactic Council, but had been deeply integrated into every aspect of galactic civilization. Their ships had patrolled the trade routes, keeping pirates and raiders away from merchant vessels. Their engineers had maintained the automated systems that controlled everything from traffic signals to life support on space stations. Their doctors had treated diseases that affected multiple species with medicines that no one else knew how to make. Dr. Amy Rodriguez would have been coordinating the medical response to the plague outbreak on Theta Centauri. But she was gone, along with her entire research team. The disease was spreading through the colony population at an alarming rate. Local doctors had requested human antiviral medications, but the supply depots were empty. The manufacturing facilities that had produced these medicines for decades had been shut down and abandoned when the humans left. Council member Krikstal of the Hegemony noticed the supply shortages first during a routine administrative meeting. His people were traders who kept careful track of inventory levels across hundreds of worlds. The data was troubling. Medical supplies were down 30%. Spare parts for starships were becoming scarce, and agricultural equipment was breaking down faster than it could be repaired. Where are the medical supplies from the Sol manufacturers? He asked the supply coordinator, a nervous Altarian clerk named Veltar. The clerk's blue skin had turned a pale shade that indicated stress. The human companies are no longer responding to our orders, council member. Their facilities appear to have been abandoned. Krikstal's species had 4 arms and could manipulate multiple data tablets at once. He quickly pulled up shipping records from the past 6 months. The pattern was clear. Human-made goods had simply stopped arriving. Ships that should have been delivering medicine, spare parts, and manufactured goods had never left. Human space thought the Zephyrian colonies that had specialized in growing food for the inner worlds were reporting their own problems. Their agricultural systems had been designed and maintained by human specialists who understood how to adapt Earth crops to alien soil conditions. Without these experts, crop yields were dropping significantly. Some colonies were facing the possibility of famine within a year. Engineer Pete Davidson would have solved the power grid failures on New Geneva in a matter of hours. But Pete was long gone. The orbital city housed 12 million beings from 6 different species. When the main fusion reactor started showing signs of instability, the local engineering teams realized they had no idea how to fix it. The reactor used human-designed safety protocols that were incredibly effective but required human knowledge to implement. The city administrator, a crystalline assembly member named Vex Allen, sent increasingly desperate messages to the council, requesting emergency assistance. His people were living crystals who could survive in vacuum for short periods, but the other species on his station would die quickly if life support failed. "We need human engineers immediately," his final message stated. "Our local teams cannot understand their reactor designs. Please send help before we lose 12 million lives." But there were no human engineers to send. The terraforming projects that had been turning dead worlds into garden planets began shutting down one by one. These massive undertakings required constant supervision and adjustment by experts who understood atmospheric chemistry, soil biology, and climate control. Human scientists had been leading most of these projects, working with alien teams to create new homes for expanding populations. On Kepler 9, the same system where humans had once rescued Altari miners from pirates, the terraforming equipment started malfunctioning after 6 months without maintenance. The atmospheric processors were designed to be nearly foolproof, but they still needed regular calibration and repair. Without human technicians, the delicate balance of gases in the atmosphere began to shift. The colonists watched helplessly as their new world slowly became unlivable again. Oxygen levels dropped while carbon dioxide increased. The carefully cultivated plant life began dying, and the artificial weather systems failed completely. Within a year, Kepler-9 would be abandoned, its terraforming project a total loss. Most troubling of all was the increase in pirate activity throughout the outer systems. The Scarth Brotherhood and other criminal organizations had been held in check for decades by the presence of human patrol fleets. These ships had maintained regular schedules along the major trade routes, responding quickly to any reports of raider activity. Now the trade routes were largely undefended. Council species had their own security forces, but these were designed for local defense rather than the rapid response capability that humans had provided. A pirate attack that would have been stopped in hours now might go unchallenged for days or weeks. Merchant Captain Tolmer of the Hegemony learned this the hard way when his cargo vessel was attacked near the Rigel system. His ship was carrying medical supplies desperately needed on 3 different worlds. The pirates disabled his engines and began boarding his vessel, following the same pattern they had used for years. In the past, Tolmer would have activated his emergency beacon and waited for a human patrol ship to arrive. The response time was usually less than 2 hours. This time, he activated the beacon and waited and waited. After 18 hours drifting helplessly while pirates looted his cargo, a Zephyrian patrol ship finally arrived to find his vessel stripped clean. Where were the human responders? Tolmer asked the Zephyrian captain. The patrol ship commander simply clicked his mandibles. There are no human responders anymore. Did you forget? The council voted to remove them from our space. Ambassador Kelthara tried to maintain optimism in her weekly reports to the Vorthan Collective, but privately she was beginning to worry. The humans had not just left, but had taken their knowledge, their innovation, and their protection with them. Systems that had worked smoothly for decades were beginning to break down without human maintenance. She stood in her office, looking out at the stars, where human ships had once traveled regularly. The space lanes seemed emptier now, with fewer ships moving goods between worlds. Trade was slowing as pirates became bolder and supply chains broke down. Scientific progress had nearly stopped without human research partnerships. The other council members were starting to ask uncomfortable questions during their meetings. Why had medical research suddenly stalled? Where would they get replacement parts for their aging infrastructure? How would they defend their trade routes without human patrol ships? Kelthara had no good answers. The council had voted to remove humanity from galactic civilization, assuming that other species could easily fill the gaps left behind. They had been wrong. Humans had not just been participants in their society, but had been essential to its basic functioning. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about taking things for granted. For 30 years, humans had quietly maintained the systems that kept civilization running. Now that they were gone, those systems were failing one by one. And this was only the beginning. The Korthic invasion fleet appeared at the edge of the Centauri system exactly 1 year after humanity had vanished from galactic space. War Commander Gregthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays show dozens of undefended worlds ripe for conquest. His reptilian features twisted into what his species considered a smile. For decades, the Korthic Empire had been held back by one thing: human military forces. Every time his people had tried to expand their territory, human patrol ships had appeared to stop them. Human generals had coordinated defense strategies that turned Korthic advantages into weaknesses. Human soldiers had fought with a ferocity that even his warrior race respected, but now the humans were gone. General Kate Sullivan should have been commanding the rapid response fleet from her headquarters on Mars. She would have detected the Korthic buildup weeks earlier and positioned human ships to intercept the invasion force before it could reach populated worlds. Her tactical computers would have analyzed Korthic battle patterns and developed countermeasures within hours. Instead, the Council's own defense forces faced the invasion with no preparation and no coordination. The first target was New Geneva, the orbital city that had been struggling with power failures since human engineers disappeared. The Korthic war fleet surrounded the station within hours, their massive ships bristling with weapons that could crack planets. City Administrator Vex Allen tried to organize a defense, but his security forces were designed for crowd control, not military combat. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. Korthic boarding parties swarmed through New Geneva's corridors, while their ships pounded the station's defenses into scrap metal. 12 million beings from 6 different species were either killed or captured. The survivors were loaded into slave transports, while the Korthic stripped everything valuable from the ruined city. Vex Allen's final transmission reached the Council chambers just as his crystalline body was shattered by Korthic weapons. "They have studied human tactics," he reported. "They know our weaknesses. Send help immediately." But there was no help to send. The Council emergency session was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other in languages that the translation computers could barely handle. Ambassador Kelher tried to maintain order, but even her usually calm insect demeanor was showing signs of panic. "We need to mobilize all available fleets," declared Councilmember Krickstow. His 4 arms were moving frantically as he tried to coordinate defense efforts on multiple data tablets at once. "With what?" replied the Zephyrian ambassador. "Our patrol ships are designed for policing trade routes, not fighting a war. The Korthic have battle cruisers that outgun anything we have." The truth was becoming obvious to everyone in the chamber. The Galactic Council's military forces had always been supplemented by human fleets. When facing serious threats like the Korthic Empire, it was human ships that provided the heavy firepower, while alien vessels handled support roles. Without humans, the Council had no real military capability. Planet after planet fell to the Korthic. Advance. The agricultural worlds that fed the inner systems were overrun within weeks. Refugee streams flooded the core territories as entire populations fled before the invasion. Ships designed to carry cargo were packed with families trying to escape the advancing war machine. Captain Steve Parker would have been leading the counterattack that could have stopped the Korthic advance at the Vega choke point. The narrow passage between stellar formations was a perfect place to ambush the enemy fleet with coordinated strikes from multiple directions. Human tactical doctrine had identified this weakness in Korthic strategy decades earlier. Instead, the passage was left undefended, and the invasion force swept through to attack the inner worlds. Dr. Lisa Carter would have been analyzing Korthic biological weapons and developing countermeasures to protect civilian populations. The reptilian warriors had a history of using disease as a weapon, releasing engineered viruses that affected multiple species while leaving their own forces immune. Her research facilities had stockpiles of treatments ready for exactly this scenario. But the research facilities were empty, and the stockpiles had been destroyed when humans abandoned their territory. The plague bombs hit 6 major population centers simultaneously. The Altarian homeworld lost half its population in the first week as a respiratory virus spread through their air recycling systems. The Zephyrian colonies watched helplessly as their people died from blood poisoning that turned their gray skin black before shutting down their organs. Council member Talmer of the Hegemony watched his own homeworld burn from the bridge of an evacuation ship. His people were traders, not warriors, and they had no defense against Korthic orbital bombardment. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were reduced to radioactive craters in a matter of hours. How did we let this happen? He asked Ambassador Kelthara as they watched another transport ship explode under Korthic fire. Kelthara's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep distress among her people. We thought we could manage without the humans. We were wrong. The Korthic had studied human military tactics for decades, learning from every battle and defeat. They knew how humans thought, how they fought, and how they won. But the Council, species had never learned to fight without human strategic support. Their own military doctrines assumed that human forces would always be available to handle the most dangerous threats. Commander Jake Morrison would have been coordinating the evacuation of civilian populations from threatened worlds. His logistics expertise had saved millions of lives during previous crises, organizing refugee fleets and establishing temporary colonies in safe systems. The orbital defense platforms he had helped design were specifically built to hold off attackers long enough for civilians to escape, but the platforms were abandoned, and there was no one left who understood how to operate them. The Cascade reactor failure that destroyed 3 orbital cities around Rigel Prime was exactly the kind of disaster that human safety protocols were designed to prevent. Engineer Pete Davidson had written the emergency procedures that could have contained the explosion and saved the surrounding infrastructure. Instead, the fusion reactors overloaded in sequence, each explosion triggering the next until the entire orbital complex was vaporized. The blast contaminated the entire star system with deadly radiation, making it uninhabitable for centuries. 5 billion beings died in less than an hour. The survivors had no choice but to abandon the system completely. Refugee ships fled toward the galactic core, carrying the few million people who had managed to escape before the reactors exploded. Many of these vessels were overcrowded cargo, haulers never designed to support life for extended periods. Dr. Amy Rodriguez would have been treating the radiation sickness that affected thousands of refugees, but her medical research was gone along with the treatments she had developed. Alien doctors tried to help, but they lacked the knowledge to treat conditions that human medicine had easily handled. The Korthic war machine seemed unstoppable without human forces to oppose it. Their strategy was simple and effective. Strike fast, hit multiple targets simultaneously, and use superior firepower to overwhelm any resistance. It was the same approach they had tried for decades, but now there were no human fleets to counter their attacks. War Commander Greg Thole studied the tactical displays in his command center with satisfaction. His forces had conquered more territory in 1 year than they had managed in the previous 20. The key difference was obvious. No humans were interfering with his plans. The reptilian commander had fought human forces many times over the years. He respected their skill and feared their determination. Human soldiers fought like they had nothing to lose, and human generals thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But now the humans were gone, and the galaxy was defenseless. Council Admiral Kent Hoole commanded the last major fleet, still resisting the Korthic advance. His ships were hiding in the asteroid fields around Wolf 359, trying to avoid the enemy. Scouts that were hunting for them. His force had once been the pride of the Council military, but now it was just a handful of damaged vessels running low on supplies. His communications officer, a young Altarian named Velsine, approached with the latest intelligence reports. Sir, the Korthic have taken the Procyon system. That leaves only the core world still under Council control. Kent Hoole studied the star charts, showing red markers for every system that had fallen to the invaders. The Korthic controlled nearly half the galaxy now, and their advance showed no signs of slowing. His own fleet was too small to make any meaningful difference against such overwhelming force. He activated the emergency communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending the same desperate message toward the galactic rim, where humans had disappeared. Humanity, if you can hear this transmission, we need your help. We were wrong to force you away. The galaxy is dying without you. Please come back. The response was nothing but empty static from the void beyond. Known space. The silence was more terrifying than any Korthic war cry. Ambassador Kelthara stood before the largest assembly of starships in galactic history. 3 years into the Korthic crisis, she had been promoted to emergency coordinator of what remained of the Galactic Council. Her new title meant very little. When half the member species had already withdrawn to defend their core territories, and the other half were begging for help she could not provide. The search fleet floating in space around her represented the combined resources of every remaining Council world. 1,000 ships of different designs and sizes, from massive hegemony exploration vessels to small Altarian scout craft. All of them were preparing for the same desperate mission: find the humans who had vanished 3 years ago and convince them to save a galaxy that had rejected them. "This is our last hope," she announced over the fleet communication channel. Her insect-like voice was translated into dozens of languages as species representatives listened from their command bridges. "The humans are out there somewhere beyond the rim. We must find them and bring them home." Scout Commander Yul Thresh of the Crystalline Assembly checked his star charts one final time before his ship departed for the galactic edge. His people were living crystals who could survive in the vacuum of space, making them ideal scouts for long-range exploration. He had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, following the human exodus, route into completely unknown territory. First clues had been discovered 6 months earlier when a Zephyrian deep space probe detected unusual energy signatures beyond the Orion Spur. The readings suggested massive industrial activity in regions where no known species had ever traveled. Whatever was out there was building something on a scale that dwarfed anything in Council space. Captain Maria Santos would have been able to decode the energy patterns immediately. Her expertise in exotic physics had made her the leading expert on faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation. But Maria was gone with the rest of her species, and the Council's best scientists could only guess at what the readings meant. The search fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each following a different possible exodus route. Some headed toward the galactic north, where human deep space telescopes had once detected potentially habitable systems. Others moved toward the southern rim, following faint traces of human ion drives that had been detected by automated monitoring stations. Yul Thresh led his squadron toward the coordinates where the energy readings had been strongest. His ship was equipped with the most advanced sensors available, but even these seemed primitive compared to the technology humans had developed during their time in Council space. He often wondered what new innovations they might have created during their 3 years in exile. The first discovery came 2 weeks into the search mission. A hegemony exploration vessel found the remains of a massive construction site orbiting a dead star in the void between galaxies. The structures were clearly human in design, but built on a scale that seemed impossible. Dock facilities that could. Service ships larger than anything in the Council fleet. Manufacturing plants that covered entire asteroids. Refineries that had processed more raw material than some systems produced in a decade, but everything had been stripped clean and moved. "They were here," reported Captain Talvier as his ship scanned the abandoned site. "Industrial capacity beyond anything we have ever seen. But they have taken everything and gone deeper into the void." The search teams found similar sites throughout the galactic rim. Evidence of massive human construction projects that had been completed and then abandoned. Shipyards that had built vessels of unknown design. Research facilities that had conducted experiments in technologies the Council had never imagined. Mining operations that had harvested entire asteroid belts. Each discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had humans developed such advanced technology so quickly? Where had they gotten the resources for such massive projects? And, most importantly, where had they gone next? Dr. Nina Foster would have been leading the scientific analysis of these discoveries. Her theoretical physics research had always pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. The strange energy readings detected at multiple sites suggested technology that operated on principles beyond current understanding. But Nina was somewhere in the unknown void with her research team, and the council scientists struggled to make sense of what they were finding. The breakthrough came when Yul Thresh discovered a partially intact data storage device floating in the debris field of an abandoned human outpost. The device was heavily damaged, but his ship's computers managed to recover fragments of information that changed everything. The data suggested that humans had not just been building ships and stations, but had been conducting experiments with time dilation technology. While 3 years had passed in normal space, the humans might have experienced decades or even centuries of accelerated development. They had been using artificial time fields to speed up their research and construction projects. This explains everything, Yul Thresh reported to the Search Fleet Command. They have had more time to advance than we realized. Much more time. The implications were staggering. If humans had experienced decades of development, while only 3 years passed for the rest of the galaxy, their technology could be centuries ahead of anything the Council possessed. They might have solved problems that had puzzled Galactic science for millennia. Meanwhile, the Korthik continued their relentless advance. War Commander Greg Thule had consolidated his conquests and was preparing for the final assault on the core worlds. His forces now controlled 3/4 of known space, and the remaining Council territories were isolated, pockets of resistance that could not last much longer. The refugee crisis had become overwhelming. Billions of beings from dozens of species were crowded into the few systems still under Council protection. Food was running short, medical supplies were critically low, and tensions between different species were rising as resources became scarce. Council Admiral Kent Hoole continued broadcasting his desperate messages toward the galactic rim, but the silence remained complete. Humanity, we know you are out there. The galaxy is dying without you. Please respond. We will accept any terms you require. The search fleet pressed deeper into the void, following increasingly faint traces of human presence. Some ships had traveled so far beyond the galaxy that the Milky Way itself was just a distant spiral of light behind them. They were entering regions of space that no known species had ever explored. Captain Steve Parker would have been leading the deep space reconnaissance that could have tracked the human Exodus fleet. His expertise in navigation and his knowledge of human exploration patterns would have been invaluable in predicting where his people might have gone. But Steve was part of the very fleet they were trying to find. Young communications officer Velsine aboard Admiral Kent Hoole's flagship detected something unusual in the background radiation 3 months into the search. The pattern was subtle, but definitely artificial. It suggested some kind of massive communication network operating on frequencies that no Council species used. Admiral, I think I have found something, she reported excitedly. There is a communication pattern in the cosmic background radiation. It is very faint, but it appears to be coming from outside our galaxy. Kent Hoole studied the data with growing hope. If humans were indeed communicating across intergalactic distances, it meant they were not only alive, but had developed technology far beyond anything previously imagined. The search fleet changed course, immediately heading toward the source of the mysterious signals. But even at maximum speed, the journey would take months. Time they might not have got back in Council space. The Korthik were massing for their final offensive. Intelligence reports suggested they would attack the core worlds within weeks. The few remaining Council fleets were outnumbered 10 to 1 and running low on supplies and ammunition Ambassador Kel Farah received the latest casualty reports in her emergency command center. The numbers were almost too large to comprehend. Trillions of beings had died in the 3 years since humanity left. Entire species were facing extinction. Whole star systems had been rendered uninhabitable, all because the Council had decided that humans were too violent to remain in civilized space. She activated the emergency broadcast system one more time, sending her message toward the search fleet and beyond into the unknown void where humanity might be listening. We were wrong about everything. We thought we were better than you, but we were just afraid of your strength. The galaxy needs that strength now. Please come home. The response was still silence, but somehow it felt different now. Not the empty quiet of abandoned space, but the deliberate silence of someone who was listening and deciding whether to answer. In the depths of intergalactic space, the search for humanity continued. Each day brought new discoveries about what humans had accomplished during their exile. Each discovery made it clearer that when humanity finally decided to return, they would not be the same species that had left. The galaxy had asked them to leave, and they had gone. But what was coming back would be something far more powerful than what had departed. The Council was about to learn that sometimes getting what you wish for is the most dangerous thing of all. A human fleet appeared in the Sol system on a Tuesday morning without any warning or announcement. Admiral Frank Williams stood on the bridge of the flagship Earth's Vengeance, watching his sensors confirm what the long-range scouts had reported. Earth was still there, still blue and green and beautiful, but the entire solar system was now occupied by Korthic forces. Massive reptilian battle stations orbited every planet. Slave camps covered the surfaces of Mars and the Moon. Mining operations had stripped asteroids bare to feed the Korthic war machine. Even Earth itself showed the scars of occupation, with dark patches where human cities had once stood. Frank had been a young captain when the Exodus began 4 years ago. Now he commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled, and his ships were unlike anything that had existed when humanity left known space. The time dilation experiments had worked beyond their wildest expectations. While 4 years passed in normal space, humanity had experienced 40 years of concentrated development and expansion. Sir, we are detecting approximately 2,000 Korthic vessels in system, reported Communications Officer Janet Miller. Her voice was calm, despite the overwhelming enemy numbers. They appear to be using our planets as forward supply bases. Frank nodded grimly. The Korthic had always been parasites, taking what others built rather than creating anything themselves. But this time, they had made a fatal mistake. They had occupied the human homeworld. Signal the fleet, Frank ordered. Begin liberation protocol. Show them what 4 decades of human innovation looks like. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Human ships moved through space with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Their weapons cut through Korthic battle fleets like plasma through tissue. New technology developed during the exile made the invaders' ships seem primitive by comparison. Energy shields that could deflect planet-killing weapons. Faster-than-light missiles that struck targets before they could even be detected. Gravity manipulators that crushed enemy vessels into compressed metal spheres. Captain Steve Parker commanded the orbital assault that eliminated Korthic ground forces on Mars. His ship, New Liberty, descended through the atmosphere like a falling star, its weapons precisely targeting military installations while carefully avoiding the human prisoner camps. Liberation teams teleported directly to the surface using technology that no Council species had ever imagined. The fighting was over so quickly that most Korthic forces never even had time to understand what was happening. Their war commander tried to send a final transmission back to the Empire before his flagship was vaporized. How are they so advanced? They have only been gone 4 years. But the transmission never reached its destination. Human ships had already surrounded every Korthic communication relay in the system. Within hours, human fleets appeared at every major Korthic stronghold simultaneously. The invasion that had taken 3 years to build crumbled in a single day. Space battles that the reptilian warriors expected to last for weeks were over in minutes. Their supposedly impregnable fortress worlds fell to human assault teams, who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. The liberation of occupied worlds followed the same pattern everywhere. Human forces would arrive without warning, destroy all Korthic military assets with overwhelming firepower, and then begin immediate humanitarian relief for the populations that had suffered under reptilian rule. Medical teams with advanced healing technology treated injuries that alien doctors had considered hopeless. Engineering crews repaired damage that would have taken years to fix using conventional methods. Dr. Lisa Carter materialized on the bridge of Altarian, refugee ship that had been drifting powerless in space for weeks. She was older now, with gray streaks in her hair that spoke of decades spent in accelerated time. But her medical knowledge had advanced far beyond what any council species possessed. "We are here to help," she announced to the ship's terrified crew. "You are safe now." Her medical team worked with efficiency that seemed miraculous to the aliens. Diseases that had plagued the refugees for months were cured with simple injections. Injuries that had left beings crippled were healed completely. Even psychological trauma from years of war was treated with therapies that restored hope and mental health within hours. But the humans did not stop with simply driving out the Korthic forces. They systematically reclaimed every lost territory, liberated every occupied world, and restored order to the chaos that the Council had allowed to spread. Their technology was so advanced that what had seemed like impossible tasks became routine operations. Engineer Pete Davidson led the reconstruction teams that rebuilt entire star systems in a matter of weeks. His crews used matter reorganization, technology that could transform asteroids into space stations or turn dead planets into garden worlds. The terraforming projects that had failed without human guidance were not just restored, but improved beyond their original specifications. President Helen Carter had been elected leader of the new Human Colonial Alliance during the exile years. She was the daughter of Dr. Lisa Carter, but had grown up in the accelerated time fields, gaining a lifetime of experience in leadership and diplomacy. When the desperate council representatives finally requested a meeting, she agreed to see them on a human ship, with humans setting all the terms. The meeting took place aboard the Human Pride, a vessel so large that it dwarfed the Council's biggest ships. Ambassador Kelthara led the alien delegation, her usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness. The other Council members who had survived the Korthic invasion looked equally shaken. "You wanted us gone," President Carter said simply, as she faced the assembled alien diplomats. "You called us violent, unpredictable, dangerous. You voted unanimously to remove us from civilized space. So we left. We found new worlds in other galaxies, built new civilizations, and advanced our technology beyond anything you thought possible. We do not need you anymore." The silence in the meeting room was profound. These were the same species leaders who had once looked down on humanity as primitive and unworthy of full council membership. Now they sat in a human ship, surrounded by technology they could barely comprehend, begging for help from the people they had rejected. Ambassador Kelthara finally found her voice. "We made a mistake. We can see that now. Please, we need your help to rebuild what was lost. The galaxy is dying without human protection." President Carter's response was measured but firm. "You will have our protection, because that is who we are as a species. We do not abandon people who need help, even people who have wronged us." But the galaxy operates under human rules now. No more council votes on human actions. No more restrictions on human expansion. No more treating us as junior partners in our own civilization. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. The Galactic Council would be dissolved and replaced by the Human Colonial Alliance Protectorate system. Species that wanted human protection and partnership would need to request it formally and abide by human standards of behavior. Those who preferred independence could have it, but they would receive no support if they found themselves in trouble. You wanted to see what the galaxy looked like without humans keeping the peace, President Carter continued. Now you know. Chaos, war, suffering, and death. That ends today? The council representatives had no choice but to accept. Their civilizations were in ruins, their fleets destroyed, their populations scattered as refugees. They needed human help to survive, and humans were offering it on generous terms despite everything that had happened. The transformation began immediately. Human ships spread throughout the galaxy, establishing new trade routes and communication networks. Space stations that had been abandoned were rebuilt with advanced technology. Worlds that had been devastated by war were restored to their former beauty and beyond. Species that had once questioned human methods now watched in amazement as problems that had seemed impossible were solved with ease. The same violent and unpredictable humans who had been rejected by the Council now worked tirelessly to heal the damage that their absence had caused. Commander Jake Morrison, now an old man with a lifetime of memories from the accelerated exile, stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Earth orbital station. He watched human patrol ships moving through the solar system, protecting trade routes and maintaining peace, just as they had done decades ago. The difference was that now nobody questioned their right to do so. Young alien officers served aboard human ships, learning the methods that had made humanity so effective at maintaining galactic peace. The aggressive tactics that had once been criticized as excessive were now studied as examples of how to respond decisively to threats. The galaxy had learned its lesson about taking human protection for granted. Species that had once voted to remove humanity from civilized space now competed for the honor of hosting human colonies. Trade agreements that had been terminated when humans left were replaced by new partnerships that heavily favored human interests. President Carter established the new capital of galactic government on a human world rather than the old council station. When alien representatives complained that this gave humans too much power, she simply smiled and reminded them of recent history.